Welcome to Bed Crime Stories podcast. I'm your host, T. If you like all things true crime, if you like it delivered in a peaceful, tranquil manner, if you like it clear and concise without drama, then I highly recommend you subscribe. And if you like what you hear, please smash the like button. It's a free way you can help. And now, without further ado, let's dig in. Want a playbook on how to be a power control serial killer? Take a look at Rex Heuermann's bail application. In it, there are notes from a document recovered from a hard drive in the basement of the Heuermann residence. The document name is HK 2002-204, which I think may stand for Heuermann Kill from 2002 to 2004, and it contains lists for what to do prior to setting the crime in motion, during the crime, and post the crime. It's a how-to based on what Heuermann learned from allegedly committing prior crimes and from reading 2 books by legendary FBI profiler John Douglas, The Mindhunter and Another Tome. All in all, it's chilling evidence of what looks to be a man driven by the psychological thrill and pleasure he derived from inflicting pain on unfortunate young women who were under his control. In short, he was murder obsessed. Allegedly, he hasn't had his day in court, so he is currently presumed innocent. If all of this is true, and if Heuermann is ultimately found guilty, then he was exceptional at employing a mask of sanity to hide his actual psychopathic tendencies. It would appear Heuermann was very good at separating his sick, murderous hobby, allegedly, from his home life with wife Asa Ellera and their 2 children. I already discussed pages 1 through 23 in a previous video. In this second part, I will detail the contents of pages 24 through 37. Let's begin. On page 24, we see a 3-category section of the HK document with the following headings: pre-prep, prep, and post-event. The items enumerated under these categories appear to be designed to lessen Heuermann's chances of getting caught. I heard an expert, Dr. Scott Bunn, say on Court TV 2 days ago that contrary to popular belief, serialists do not want to get caught. Yes, some of them are very proud of their crimes. Yes, they enjoy reliving them in their minds. But no, they don't want to be arrested. They want to keep doing what they're doing. Heuermann apparently took not getting caught very seriously. Here's what he wrote under pre-prep. VEC inspection, which I assume means vehicle inspection. This is very chilling because, like most people who maybe go on a road trip with the family, have their car inspected, it sounds like Rex Heuermann would take his dark green Chevy Avalanche in for an old grease and oil before he headed out to do his dark deeds. The second item says, Engage T1, which is believed to stand for Engage Target 1 or Victim 1, and I believe this would mean meet the targeted female and maybe engage her for her escort services. 3. Recon DS. This would mean reconnaissance of dump sites. I've heard a lot of profilers say that serial killers take just as much pleasure, if not more, in planning their crimes than carrying them out. This document definitely shows that a lot of thought went into all of this. The next item on the list says locate DS2, so locate dump site 2. Then it says weather report, then recon video cameras, so do reconnaissance for video cameras, and then it says recon pick zone for video cameras, and the pick zone is the pickup zone where he would pick up his targeted victim. He doesn't want to be caught on any video cameras. Then we have prep. That's category 2, and it says, the first item there, set up stage. That is terrifying. It sounds like if he's guilty, he may have had a special setup for where he'd harm his victims. Perhaps a table set up in his basement. The next item says holding area. This would be, I would imagine, where he would put his victims before he did whatever he did to them. And that is also terrifying because you know that these women had to have moments where they knew what was about to go down, or had a suspicion, or could tell that this wasn't going to go well. The more I read through these documents, it becomes more clear that it sounds like he did commit his crimes in his Massapequa Park home, and I think it was in that basement. It seems clear that he did not want to tangle with these women. He wanted to hold them in an isolated area and control them. Then it says build table. My first thought on this went to he built himself a custom table on which to likely hold his victims down. What makes this particularly chilling is that he made furniture as a hobby. I don't know if you remember that, but he had a lot of woodworking tools, and one of his hobbies was supposedly making furniture. And now I'm wondering if his furniture was custom designed for this particular craft. Now, under build table, it says crossbar and hard point. So it sounds like he may have strapped his victims to a table. The crossbar is something that's placed underneath the table to provide additional support. The hard point, per the investigators, refers to, get this, I can't even say it, SEXUAL, suspension, BONDAGE. Okay, this is some crazy stuff. Picture this giant, hulking man. You've seen images of Heuermann. If he's the guy and he's standing there and he drags these women into this area and they start to see his contraptions, it's like something out of a horror movie. So it sounds like he had a fixed attachment point in the ceiling that would support the weight of a person, a petite person, because we know he had a type, and perhaps this is one of the reasons he preferred petite women, so that he could suspend them off the ground. All of this is supported by Heuermann's interest in P, where a victim is either suspended, bound to a table, parts cut off, if you know what I mean, things that are sharp jabbed at their chests. We're dealing with a very sick puppy. Now, I've heard experts again call him a power control serialist, and they are motivated, as I said earlier, by gaining gratification from controlling a victim. Ted Bundy and Dennis Rader were all power control serialists. They are all motivated by the process of murder. Gary Ridgway and John Wayne Gacy were also power control serialists. So what these people enjoy doing is stalking their victims, capturing their victims, and then hurting their prey. Tragically, they get off doing this to their victims slowly in order to prolong their own sadistic pleasure. According to Dr. Scott Bunn, power control serialists are frequently stone-cold psychopaths, and they fall into the FBI's organized category of predators. They are meticulous planners, unflappable, and patient. What's equally upsetting is that they are frequently charming, charismatic, and intelligent. I mean, I think we got a taste of that in that interview of Heuermann. He tries to be charming and charismatic. He definitely likes talking to the camera. What worries me is that these women maybe did not get a spidey sense feel for this guy ahead of what happened to them. Could he have somehow made himself seem like a very benign, very not dangerous kind of guy to these women? I know that one lady, I can't remember her name, but she met him for dinner and her spidey sense did go off. And she, thank God, avoided a confrontation with who she believes to be Heuermann. Well, under the third category, post-event, are the words destroy file, change tires. That's interesting. Sounds like he bought new tires, perhaps with a different tread, just in case his truck left tire marks at the crime scenes and or dump sites. I think that must have gotten a little expensive. Next, under post-event, it says burn gloves, dispose of pics. So dispose of photos. So he documented these crimes perhaps, but then he disposed of the photos. And then the last thing says have story set. So this would seem to indicate that he needed to come up with a story, perhaps for his wife and family, as to what he was up to the whole time they were off on vacation. You know, if he did get rid of the photos so that he could no longer enjoy them, but he felt maybe safer not having that documentation, I feel like the reason he dumped the bodies near his home, aside from it being a good dumping ground, I think that was in essence his own personal cemetery and a place where he could look down from his house in Massapequa Park and he could envision those victims lying there in the marshes. He could also go visit them. It was just a short car ride. So if he is guilty, he definitely tried to keep at least the Gilgo Beach 4 victims hidden in those marshy grasses. Remember, 3 of the 4 women were wrapped in a camouflage print burlap. Back to the list. The HK document continues with other preparatory measures, such as specific reconnaissance. It looks like he took the time to research video cameras along various routes and specific exits. For example, he notes 33 cameras along New York State Route 112 to Route 110. And then he notes 10 cameras from Southern State Parkway to New York State 231, exit 30. He also lists his targets or future victims' cell phone number and voicemail number. Under the takedown/pickup category, which stands for where he'd pick up his targeted victims, the bullet points say 1. Hunt too long, seen in area too long. I think this means don't hunt too long for your victim because you risk getting spotted. Bullet 2, remember, don't charge gas. Sounds like Heuermann didn't want to leave any breadcrumbs in the form of receipts, especially with the dates on them. Bullet 3, recon for vid cams in pickup area next time. So obviously he had committed a crime already because he's saying next time do reconnaissance for video cameras in pickup area. And now we get to perhaps the most chilling section. It's called body prep, and the bullets say 1. Wash body inside and all cavities. All of these items are for after the crime has been committed. The second bullet says remove trace evidence, and then in parentheses it says fingerprints/hair. We know he didn't do a great job of that because some hair was left behind. Bullet 3 says remove trace DNA. The next bullet says remove ID marks, and in parentheses it says tattoos, marks. And we know that for Jessica Taylor, she had a tattoo, and the perpetrator used a sharp object to try and remove it. The next bullet says, remove marks from, I don't even want to say this word, but I'm going to, torture. He spelled it wrong. Rex Heuermann is not a good speller. He spells torture Tourture. He spells evidence Evendice. He spells tattoo Tatoos. The next one says remove head and hands. The way this is written, it's almost like a shopping list or a honey-do list, which again points to how cold and calculating this guy is. Okay, so this is from his first MO, apparently, or I shouldn't say his first, let's say his earlier modus operandi, because those earlier victims appear to have been missing their heads and their hands. And when I say earlier victims, I'm also thinking of Valerie Mack. He's the prime suspect for her death, but he hasn't yet been charged for it. Valerie is mentioned in this document. My theory on that is that he found it way too rigorous to do that, way too messy, way too time-consuming, way too risky. Could that explain why the Gilgo 4 victims were all intact? The last one chillingly reads, package for transport. Was he using plastic bags to transport these things? I mean, for those earlier victims, he would have needed something plastic to contain things, to keep from dripping things, if you know what I mean. There's another section that says things to remember. The first bullet says, sound travels. In parentheses, bird outside. Control the amount of air in and out to control the noise made. Again, I'm leaning toward these crimes being committed in his home in Massapequa Park in the basement. If you've been following this case, you may recall that a colleague of his who came over to talk about some interior design options wanted to get into that room, and he was adamant that they would not go into that space. That basement area was off limits. Second bullet says, get sleep before hunt. Too tired creates problems. Again, this sounds like he might have committed an earlier crime. He was fatigued and he felt that it led to extra problems. When I worked for a publishing company, after we produced a product, we would hold what we called a post-mortem. This HK document seems like a post-mortem, and when you think about those words, they're really apropos. 3, hit harder. Too many hit to take down. Consider a hit to the face or neck next time. This one really upset me. I thought of a number of things. Do you remember that painting or drawing that came out of the Heuermann house? It showed a young blonde woman. Her face, particularly her eyes, were black and blue. And I think of his stature and his girth, and I think of the faces of these young women and their petite bodies. It becomes all the more upsetting. What a brute this guy is. This is a boogeyman come to life. I believe he's guilty. I'm going to say allegedly, though, because he hasn't been convicted in a court of law for takedown. So clearly he was using his fists to take these women down, to knock them out. Perhaps that's how he started the crime. Get them to where he wanted them, lure them to his home, and then knock them out. And during that time, he secures them so that they can't fight back. What a coward this guy is. He picked on victims who couldn't fight back. They were never going to win. They were so much smaller than he is. He's a bully who picks on the last gazelle in the group. The next one says more sleep and noise control equals more playtime. That's a scary thought. I'm assuming playtime is his sick playtime with the victim. Then it says use push pins to hang drop cloths from ceiling, not tape. So did he use tape and the drop cloths fell? I'm assuming that these were for avoiding splatter on the walls. I said that wrong. I should have said spatter. It's blood spatter. The next one says Use heavy rope for neck. Light rope broke under stress of being tightened. So clearly he had used all of this on a victim and run into a rope getting broken. By the way, he spelled heavy, Hevey. This guy is so cold, so calculated, so lacking in feeling. And by the way, I did read that push pins were found in that basement area. So all of this helps support the case against Rex Heuermann. Under a section called Notes, the first bullet says, spur of the moment, then the word cover with a question mark, then Stockholm Syndrome. I don't know if you guys know what Stockholm Syndrome is. It sometimes happens when captors take captives. The captives spend enough time with the captors that they start to trust them and feel connected to them in some way. And so when people come to rescue them, they might not want to go. They might be fearful and they might cling to their captor. The second bullet says, the more you do, the more clues you give. Interesting. Very much obsessed with not leaving a lot of clues behind. Again, as much as he probably wants to talk about his crimes and brag about them, he doesn't want to get caught because he wants to keep living this lifestyle. 3, look at the painting. What, why, who? So this was a reference to the FBI profiler John Douglas, who writes about trying to figure out who committed a crime. And he's like, if you want to know about the perpetrator, you need to look at the crime. So he uses the analogy, if you want to understand the painter, look at the painting. So look at the crime, look at everything in the crime scene, look at the victim, look at all of that. And that will help you understand the perpetrator, which hopefully will lead you to the perpetrator. Is it a family man with a deep, dark secret that he keeps from his family, like Dennis Rader, and maybe like Rex Heuermann? Is it a loner or someone who lives with his elderly parents? Could it be a truck driver who sees the highways and byways of America as his hunting ground? The next thing he lists is organized versus disorganized. The next thing he mentions is page 160. He's referencing the book The Mind Hunter, and he writes sex substitution, page 163, page 175, mutilation. By the way, he mutilates the word mutilation because, again, he can't spell. But he writes mutilation equals disorganized. And when he talks about sex substitution, he's referencing using an inanimate object or another object other than a body part, if you know what I mean. So doing something to the victim, not using anything on his own body, but some other object. Next comes a section entitled Dispose of the Following. It reads, tools and devices. Could this be related to cutting tools? And could the devices be the burner phones that we've heard that he used? Bullet 2, drop claws. He mentioned those earlier, saying they needed to be secured to the ceiling using stick pins. The way he writes it, it makes it sound like he tried tape in an earlier crime and it didn't hold, maybe. It wasn't effective, perhaps. Did the drop cloths fall? Did he decide maybe that tape was too dangerous because a piece of his hair might fall onto the tape and somehow the tape could be maybe found, discarded somewhere by the authorities? We've heard that serialists evolve over time. They learn from their mistakes. Bullet 3, wipes and towels. Are these what he used to clean the cavities that he mentioned earlier to try to get rid of DNA evidence? Oh, I forgot to mention Target 1 clothes, so that would be the victim's clothes and her personal items. So he didn't save any of those. He wasn't tempted like Dennis Rader to stuff things under a cabinet in the family hallway, apparently. This shows a certain level of discipline if he really didn't keep any of their items, and a huge drive not to get caught. And then he writes, props, toys, and wood items. This is something that is chilling because it makes me wonder what toys he was using. What wood items is he referencing? Could these be the items he used for substitution? Then he writes, anything that touched target 1. Then he writes, what you wore. So it sounds like he had to dispose of the clothing that he was wearing. It makes me wonder if he bought special clothing items for his crimes, clothing that his wife may not have seen, because otherwise, if he had clothes that were existing and she never sees, say, that pink polo anymore, she might be saying, what happened to that shirt? The next one says, destroy book and computer files. And there is evidence that he tried to delete this particular file. Then it says burn gloves. And the last one is dispose of box of plastic bags to avoid trace. So this HK document, which I think stands for Heuermann kill, is basically a blueprint for murder. Heuermann, like Dennis Rader, thought he was smarter than the authorities, and for many years he did elude detection. This person, if he is guilty, is the type who must remain behind bars for the rest of his life. I don't think they have the death penalty in New York, so unfortunately the best that can be done is he can be placed behind bars. Until the next time, on Bed Crime Stories. If you learned anything, please smash that like button, and I'll see you next time. By the way, I've got a new tank top in my store. Check it out. It's got some amazing designs on the front and back. I think you're gonna like it, and it's reasonably priced.